It's the Worldwide Sports Radio Network.
What's going on, everybody? I got two very special guests as we have a packed show today. A lot of football to talk about. We're going to touch on some NBA to wrap up the show. But for now, I got Dan and I got Detroit Beastie. Guys, what's going on?
Thanks for having me.
You guys reached out on Sunday, and here we are.
Here we go. So to start off, I want to talk about that fourth down conversion that Andy Reid decided to go for it of 22-17 against the Browns. Backup quarterback Chad Henne. Andy Reid had faith in him to throw the ball on 4th and 1. What do you guys think of that? Dan, I'll start with you.
It's what makes Andy Reid so much fun to watch, and as a head coach, he's just fearless. But I also think it points out, he was concerned in that moment that Cleveland had something going. They really had some momentum. They were controlling the ball when they had a chance on offense, although the drive before came up short. And I think he recognized it at that moment of the game. They were 1 yard away from putting the thing away, and he had that kind of confidence in Chad Henne. And I think we all saw, what an advantage it was for a guy who doesn't get a chance to play very much, that he did get to play in week 17 when they rested their guys. Real gutsy, but I wouldn't have expected anything less from Andy Reid. We've seen that all the time. The question now is Chad Henne going to be the guy this week or not as well?
Chris?
Not too many coaches have the stones or the fortitude, as they say, to go for that when everything's on the line there. A trip to the AFC Championship game, what are we going to do? But as Dan said, I wouldn't expect anything less from a guy like Andy Reid. Now, I know social media is a very toxic place. I find it to be personally. But people were saying Andy Reid is the best coach alive because of that. Let's hold our horses here. When a guy like Patrick Mahomes is out of the game, we forget how good the kid is. You throw in a guy like Chad Henne, who was a starter all 4 years in college. He's a very capable backup here. And Andy Reid did what a lot of us want our head coaches to do, especially here in Detroit. Let the players play. Give it to the players and let them decide the game, not on some odd, coaching decision to punt or kick or anything like that. Andy Reid is a man's man, I should say, a coach's coach, and he let his players play. And look what happened. They now, are playing in the AFC Championship game.
It was really impressive what Andy Reid did. Had the guts to go for it with your backup quarterback. I feel like the Chiefs always run that same play on 4th down. Your wide receiver runs out right a little bit, and it's just a quick, short, safe pass. You get the first down. You land in bounds. That's it. Game over. That's a lot of balls doing that with your backup quarterback. Sure, like you said, Chad Henne is one of the better backup quarterbacks in the league. He's a veteran in this league. He's had time as a starter. There are some backup quarterbacks in this league who don't belong in the league, straight up. But there are a handful who can start in this league, and Chad Henne actually could be one of them. The thing I like about about Andy Reid, what he did, he trusted his players. That's a big thing in this league, and especially in sports. As a coach, you need to trust your players to deliver. You go down fighting. Don't play scared. Don't play conservative. That's where teams blow games. All the great organizations, those are the guys who are going to be aggressive. We've seen Bill Belichick throughout his entire career, always a very aggressive coach. Those are the guys who are successful. A big reason I'm a Jets fan, so I'll bring up the Jets real quick. Why I believe Sam Darnold is not performing? Because Adam Gase doesn't believe in him. He plays safe. He tries to run the ball only. He never has any faith in Darnold. If you don't have faith in your players, they're never going to deliver. And even though Mahomes is the greatest quarterback in the league, so when this situation comes, we've seen time and time again where they were aggressive on 4th down and trusted the ball in Mahomes' hand. But it's like normal to do that because of how great Patrick Mahomes is. So he's a guy you can trust. But a guy like Chad Henne, teams I didn't expect. I thought they were going to try to draw him off sides and then punt the ball. That would have been the same thing.
So did Tony Romo.
Right. So with that being said, I mean, that looked like a situation where if they don't get it, they're going to lose the game. That Chiefs defense is no defense you're confident in. It's one thing going for it in that situation when you have a top 5 defense who's playing lights out that day. The Chiefs defense, especially their run defense, is just something I would never trust. I don't want I don't want my season depending on the Chiefs defense. I'd rather be the ball in our hands. That's where it's more comfortable. And Andy Reid ultimately, as we've seen, made the right decision.
I think it also points out, you talk about trusting the player in Chad Henne to make that play and Tyreek Hill, but you trust your scheme and you trust your play call too. I mean, that's a play that they just felt really confident in. It's well designed, very similar to the play we saw where Green Bay got their first touchdown with Devontae Adams going in motion and running the little shallow cross there in front of Jalen Ramsey. You trust the play call. You put the right players in a position to make a play. It's frustrating. I'm a Seahawk fan, right? I'm here in Seattle. It's frustrating to see other teams in the playoffs. You see this all the time. It's easy to get jealous when coaches just scheme well, execute well. I think that's what sets these teams apart. These 8 teams, yes, they have more talent than most other teams in the league, but they execute better too. And we saw that all over the field in all 4 games.
100%. And look, guys, Brendan, you're with me. I'm a Detroit Lions fan. So what is there to be? I'm envious and jealous of everybody and anybody. If a team wins 8 games, I'm jealous as a Lions fan. And we all know Kansas City, even Green Bay to some extent, these are the best teams in the National Football League, right? And we can do X's and O's and play calling and fantasy sports all we want. But to me personally, it comes down to one thing for Kansas City. As you said, you both have said it. Kansas City runs the same play over and over again. And they're just saying to the other team, the other coach, the opposing defense, we're going to run the same play over and over again. Stop us if you can. And up to this point, nobody has stopped Kansas City yet, seeing how they're the defending Super Bowl champions, and they're on the doorstep of another Super Bowl here. So when a team can just say, hey, this is what we're going to do, we're going to shove it down your throat and try to stop us. And they do it anyway. I love that kind of football.
Yeah.
With Mahomes, though, leaving in the third quarter, he's going under concussion protocols all week long. Do you guys expect him to return this week against the Bills? Because obviously, if Mahomes isn't there, it's a wrap. The Chiefs are not going to the Super Bowl, and of course, not winning the Super Bowl. But some may say, I heard Andy Reid say that he really just got the wind knocked out of him. He should be fine. How important is this that he's back practicing as soon as possible? Because again, even if he misses 6 days or 5 days of practice and then he just comes on the field Sunday, we don't know what to expect from him. What do you guys think about Mahomes leaving the game?
I think it's huge because I think we saw what Cleveland was able to do against Kansas City in Kansas City. I think Buffalo matches up better with them, and you could really make an argument that they're a tough matchup in this situation. I agree with you. I think they have to have Patrick Mahomes on the field to have a chance to win this game, and we probably won't know until Thursday or Friday. I've read just a couple hours ago that he's not showing symptoms of a concussion, but I've also read just in the last couple hours that it may be a nerve issue and not necessarily a traditional concussion. We all saw what he looked like when he got up off that field and how he had to be helped up and how woozy he looked. And we've seen other similar situations around the league this year result in a player being out for the next game. So I think there's a lot of pressure on the league. There's a lot of pressure on the medical staff to get him out there for the game Sunday, but they need to make sure that they're dotting all their I's and crossing all their T's and that they follow the proper protocol. I think Buffalo's playing so well right now. Sean McDermott has that defense playing so well right now. Josh Allen's playing at such a high level. I think Patrick Mahomes has to be on that field Sunday for the Chiefs to have a chance.
Yeah, 100%. I'm with you. And I read the same thing, even Sunday night, that it wasn't necessarily a concussion in the sense of a concussion, your brain being moved around in your head there. It was something in his neck, a nerve that was tweaked in his neck, and it made him loopy. It whacked him out in a way. It's not official doctorate terms when you say whacked out. But if Mahomes isn't practicing all week, I could argue both sides here, guys, because that team, the Kansas City Chiefs team, is so good. They literally are the definition of a well-oiled machine there. Mm-hmm. I'd like to think Patrick Mahomes being so good. Brendan, you said that, the best quarterback in the league. Absolutely right. I don't think at this stage of the season, Mahomes needs a ton of practice time, in that, running those X's and O's here. He's going to be fine. What it comes down to is, can he make the decisions in his head is everything firing on the right cylinders? Let's say, again, as you can tell, I'm not a doctor. I don't know the way the brain works and the nerves fire here, throwing out all these odd terms. But if Patrick Mahomes is unable to play Sunday, sorry to say, I think it's all Buffalo in this one. Even if you look at it, Buffalo's getting 3 points here in Arrowhead here. And that's probably with the addition of Patrick Mahomes playing here. So if Mahomes is out, you have to side with Buffalo in this one. So for football fans and guys that do what we do, you'd like to think Patrick Mahomes plays because, again, this is the matchup we were all waiting to see all season. Week 5 and 6, we're saying Buffalo and Kansas City would be one heck of an AFC championship game.
It's interesting. It'll be interesting to see how it develops this week. I'm fascinated by this story coming out now about the nerve issue because we see guys get stingers all the time. We saw it here in Seattle in the wild card game when John Wolford went out with a stinger, and he was able to get it. You know, they carried him off, and he was walking gingerly, but there was never a moment where he looked like he lost consciousness or was woozy. What was weird about that hit on Mahomes is even in slow motion replay, it didn't look like he took a direct shot to the helmet. He kind of grazed his face mask on the ball as he was going down. The nerve thing to me is interesting that it's out there because a stinger, there's no protocol, right? Other than the doctor saying, "Oh, you're okay to go." And so if they push this narrative that it's a nerve issue, it's not a concussion. I think from a PR standpoint, if they do get him out there on the field Sunday, and I do expect somehow one way or another for him to play, that it's a little more palpable for people who are concerned about whether or not he should be out there.
I'm a big-time believer in Vegas knows things we don't know. The Chiefs being -3, that obviously means that he's expected to play. If they didn't think he was going to play, the Bills would already be heavy favorites right now in reality.
Yeah.
But with that, I think the nerve is going to be a big thing if it's more of a nerve. And again, I'm not a doctor, but if it's more of a nerve and it's not a concussion, because I don't think like humanly possible you can recover from a concussion in 6 days. I don't think that's humanly possible. I see guys come back within a week in the NFL, but there's probably something amongst those lines that we don't know.
Rick, it's interesting that before the concussion, before he got knocked out, he hurt his toe, and he was not right. He was not moving properly. He has an advantage over other guys. He doesn't necessarily have to set his back foot and throw with proper mechanics. We see that all the time. It's one of the things that makes Patrick Mahomes so great is he can throw off so many different platforms, but he wasn't right. And no one's talking about that toe now because obviously all the focus is on the concussion. So even if he plays Sunday, there may be a question of whether he's going to be 100%.
As long as he's on the field, I don't think the Chiefs have anything to worry about. When that guy's on the field, he's the best in the game. And a wise man once said, if you're on the field, you're healthy, you're 100%. There's no injuries to worry about. Who knows what they take before a game, all that stuff. So as long as he's on the field, I think they're just fine. But one more thing about this game I want to touch on before we switch gears. How about the Cleveland Browns? They made it to the divisional round of the playoffs, a huge wild card win at their division rival Pittsburgh Steelers, and they gave the defending champions a fight. What does this mean moving forward for the Browns and Baker Mayfield? Are the Browns officially a report came out that the Browns are officially committed to Baker Mayfield being the franchise quarterback? I've been a guy who's been a big hater of Baker. I just think a number one pick with that much talent on his roster, he should be in the MVP conversation. The Browns should be a better team because Baker Mayfield should be a better quarterback. When you're a number one pick in this league, you have very high expectations, which means MVP candidate, and the Browns could not have surrounded him with more talent. But we look at the second half of the year that Baker had, and he really stepped up his game. He looked like a top 15, top 10 quarterback. What do you guys think of the Browns moving forward, or what do you think of how they performed Sunday and overall this season, making the playoffs for the first time in who knows how long since like the bubonic plague pandemic, for crying out loud?
I think it's the way that they were winning and the way that they play is sustainable. That's the thing that I think is legitimate about what they're doing. They have the best offensive line in football. It all starts there. They have two very physical running backs. They got to make sure that they keep those guys long term. I think both are set for free agency this offseason, so they'll have some decisions to make there. And you pointed out the fact that Baker improved as the season went along, got so much better, tells me that Kevin Stefanski really got through to him. I think we saw something similar in Green Bay. There were questions even last year about the LaFleur-Rodgers relationship, whether that was going to work long-term, but we saw it grow over time, and I think we saw that out of Mayfield. I think he may be the right guy in that system on that team, and that offense is set up for long-term success. Now, they've got a little bit of work to do on defense, but that's what tells me the Browns were not a fluke and that they're going to be around for a while. Just the way they were doing it, I think, is really sustainable.
Yeah. Again, I agree. The Browns are well on their way to sustaining something long-term, as you said here, Dan. And I read reports that Cleveland came out and said it. They said it right to Baker. You have a fourth or fifth year option, I believe. And if you don't win the wild card game, I think we're going to decline that option. But he made it, to the divisional round of things. So Baker Mayfield is going to be their long-term quarterback in Cleveland. And again, personally, a guy my age and what I've seen and what I've watched here, there's certain teams when Washington is good, when Cleveland is good, when the Jets or the Lions are good, the NFL is just a better place. It's fun. We all like, difference. We, Patriots all the time. Patriots, we like difference. You go to a buffet, you have all these options. You watch the NFL, we have like we've had like 3 or 4 options the last, 10 years or so. And now it's kind of, there seems to be a little bit of a shift here, changing of the guard. Kansas City's going to be good for numerous seasons looking ahead. And I fully believe that Cleveland is going to be fantastic as well in that division. Pittsburgh, I know that the question wasn't to discuss all the divisions in football here, but just figuring it out as I go live with you guys. But Pittsburgh, what they're doing is something doesn't seem right. Something doesn't add up in Pittsburgh. And I think Cleveland has that division for several seasons here going forward. And bringing it back to Cleveland, they had some sort of magic, momentum, destiny, whatever you want to call it. I made no bones about it. I totally picked Cleveland to beat Kansas City and in Kansas City. And I go, well, if they lose, people forget it. And if they win, I get all the cheer and all the adulation. So, they lost and nobody cares that I made a bad call here. But something is going on in Cleveland, and it's almost, correct me if I'm wrong, guys. It's almost like, like a Disney movie script here. Everything's coming together for one of the worst franchises in football history, 0-16. All the quarterbacks they've gone through. And now I know there may be a rush to judgment because they won a playoff game and made the playoffs, as you said, since the bubonic plague here. But Cleveland is going to be good long-term, and it's very sustainable, as Dan said. So I'm excited to see what they can do. And it's fantastic when Cleveland is playing well in the league.
You talk about the concern specifically about whether Baker Mayfield is a franchise quarterback worthy of that mantle moving forward. And I think we saw signs in the playoffs in that wild card game, especially when they were ahead against Pittsburgh, that Kevin Stefanski believes he's a legit quarterback because they didn't just sit on it, milk the clock, pound the football with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. They continued to throw the football in the second half of that game, and the throws that he trusts Baker with in that offense tell me that he believes in him as a quarterback. And we talk about maybe the magic ran out, maybe it was a little fluky. If that targeting call is made at the end of the first half, that outcome might have been a whole lot different.
Absolutely. And when it comes to Cleveland, as you said, I've never had a strong opinion about Baker Mayfield one way or another. First round pick, didn't do much, but this
makes great commercials.
This season, absolutely. My favorite one is where he gives his wife the biscuits and say that this will tide them over until he's done. He's deep frying a turkey here. But I didn't have a strong opinion one way or another when it came to Baker Mayfield. But this season and this playoff run, personally, he has it. He has that it factor. He's not afraid to take a hit. He rarely slides when he's going in. Like he's a gamer. He wants to do whatever it can to help this team win. And I think he realizes how important this professional sports franchise is to the city of Cleveland. They got the Cavs, they got the Indians. Maybe that's not even allowed to be said, though, the Cleveland baseball team, however you want to put it. But Baker Mayfield is a gamer, and I think he has it, and they're going to be okay with him as their franchise quarterback.
The thing with Baker is he's just so inconsistent. Sometimes he looks like one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and another week he'll look like one of the worst quarterbacks in the league. We'll see him still make bad decisions with the ball, bad pocket awareness, the fumbles. Sometimes can be inaccurate, miss the easy throws. And then other times he's confident, he's poised, he's swinging the ball around. That's the only reason I always thought the Browns were a little limited, because of his inconsistency. I still believe him. I still think he's a product of that running game between Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. What they do in the backfield just opens up everything for that offense. And next year, them getting back OBJ healthy, then the Browns are, on top of that division. Because I was never a believer in the Pittsburgh Steelers, even though they weren't 11-0. I said publicly, the Steelers don't feel like that 11-0 team, like that undefeated time where it's like, all right, it's these guys and everybody else. It was a different feel than when the Brady Patriots had those long stretches of being undefeated. Or the Manning Indianapolis Colts were undefeated for a long stretch. It was like, all right, it's them, everybody else. I never had that feeling the Steelers were the best team in the league. And then towards the end of the season, the running game was in the toilet bowl. Ben Roethlisberger, as I refer to him, as the tin man in the pocket. The guy literally and figuratively just can't move at all in the pocket. And then they had problems in their secondary, injuries in the linebacking core. They were struggling struggling to enter the postseason, so I thought that was just an easy way for the Browns to get that victory. But with that being said, I want to switch gears and we'll somewhat stay on the AFC South, and that's the Ravens and the Bills game. But I want to start off saying, did we see the same playoff Lamar Jackson that we have in the past, even though they won against the Titans in the wild card round this season? It was another disappointing outing by him until he got hurt, and the Ravens ended up losing 17-3. What do you guys think of that? Did we see the same playoff Lamar Jackson?
I think so, and I think it just pointed out his continued limitations, and if there was going to be a big jump for him, it was going to be this year. And I'm talking about throwing the football down the field. Obviously, we know how dynamic he can be scrambling and running the football, but it's just they're so limited offensively because there's just throws that he can't make. And I'm talking specifically about those real tough like seam throws down the middle into tight coverage. He still just that wind up is long and the delivery is slow and I think he's gone as far as he can go as a passer. And the only way you're going to get more out of that, I think, is by running him more and putting him more at risk. And for that offense to work, that running game had to be dominant. And I think as you play better teams and you got into the playoffs, you came up against better running defenses. And I think they're a team, he's a dynamic player. They're going to win 10, 12 games every single year. But I think his limitations are going to prevent them. I don't see that guy winning a Super Bowl unless you build a dominant team around him. And they're going to have to pay him soon, and that's going to be tougher to achieve.
Yeah, well, they have to be dominant running the ball, as you said. And I'd like to take that a step further. They're not going to be able to dominate running the ball because Lamar Jackson is vulturing carries and touchdowns, let's say, from the rookie J.K. Dobbins. If you want to have J.K. Dobbins as your number one dynasty running back or your fantasy running back or a top three, real life running back, it's just not going to happen when you have Lamar Jackson, who rarely goes off of his first lead. First look, if it's not there, bam, he takes off and runs. More times than not, he hits on those runs, and that's cool, but he's limiting his own team in all facets of the game. As you said, he made a horrible interception. Buffalo returned for, 101 yards? Yeah. I mean, that basically, that was it. That sealed the game at the end there, and that was, a mistake a first-year quarterback makes in week 3 or 4. We're not in the divisional round of the playoffs. That just can't happen. That is a clear-cut sign that he didn't take the next step. He's not going to take the next step. And now that organization is in this weird space where, well, what do we do with him? As you said, Dan, well, we can win 10 games with him, and that's very enticing. That's very hot. It's very sexy to win 10 games in a season, but he's limited. He's only going to get us so far, and that's because of his decision to both run and pass the ball. He's not in that mindset where, regardless of the routes and the looks, if it's not there, I'm just going to throw it away. If it's not there, he takes off running. So, as I said, some are good, some are bad, but it's all he's just taking away from all weapons on the offensive side of the ball. And again, I don't really talk like this, especially on social media, because it's such a harmful place, and you'll get raked over the coals and just beat up in the streets for saying this stuff. So I want to thank you for having me, because I can actually get this stuff out, and be serious and be meaningful with what I'm saying. But Lamar Jackson is just not it for me. And it's going to be a while until Baltimore moves on from him. They're going to keep trying to make him a thing, keep trying to make it happen, all while winning 9 games, 10 games, 11 games, and they're only going to get so far. Every year is going to be the same thing. It's going to be Groundhog's Day in Baltimore with Lamar Jackson as the quarterback.
Yeah.
Right, sure. So the thing with this is Lamar Jackson is a great running back. We all know this. He's one of the most athletic quarterbacks in the history of football, next to Michael Vick and Randall Cunningham, as far as I'm concerned. The thing is, if you can't, his limitation is throwing, and I don't think that's ever going to change. We saw this at Louisville in college. We saw it in the NFL now. When they beat when they beat the Titans, all he proved is that he ran all over a really bad defense, but that's something he's always been very good at. Throwing the ball, he wasn't very good either. 179 yards with an interception. Didn't play well at all in terms of being a quarterback. Sure, you could still make plays on the ground. That's always a luxury to have. But in 2021, throwing the ball is a necessity. You need to be able to be trusted with the ball in your hands to make the easy throws, one of the big things with Lamar Jackson is he misses a lot of easy throws, misses wide open targets. He's not consistent throwing the football. You need to be trusted with the ball in your hands to be clutch, be big on third down, be smart with the ball, and that we have not seen from Lamar Jackson. As great as he is in the regular season and postseason are what he called two different seasons because they are two different seasons and it's two different types of football. In any sport, in the NBA, the regular season is entirely different than the postseason. The game slows down, there's more defense, more half court. Same thing with football. With quarterbacks, you need to be able to throw and be trusted in crunch time, when things get tight, where your palms get sweaty. That's where Lamar Jackson needs to really be that dude, and I don't think he is. Sure, he's going to get paid because he won an MVP. Once you win an MVP, of course you're going to get that big contract. So I'm not doubting whatsoever that Lamar's going to get that deal. But you know what that's going to do? Thin your roster. And once they thin the roster, they're really never going to get better. His ceiling is where they went this year, and I don't think it's ever going to change. And I don't think don't really believe he's that franchise quarterback where you're going to believe, okay, we have our franchise guy, then we could put pieces around him and he will be a superstar and be a championship caliber quarterback, because he's not. There are just simply better quarterbacks in the AFC than he is. As great as he was in his MVP season, as great as he was the second half of the season, the postseason is a different animal. And I don't think it's necessarily of people trying to call him a choke artist or whatever. He's not a choke artist because people overuse the word choke in sports. Choke means the moment was too big for you where you did something that we're not used to you seeing. That's what choking is. You just not having the ability just means you're not as good as somebody else, which that I think is in the case of Lamar Jackson. And against the Bills, there were only 2-point underdogs, which that's why I actually predicted an upset. I was like, wow, that's a sketchy line. Like, so, there's got to be something that we don't know about this game. But the Ravens defense kept them in that game. All year long, the Ravens had a top defense. All year long, and in the postseason, against a really hot team with a really hot quarterback who's in the MVP conversation with arguably a top 3 receiver in the league who led the league in receptions and yards, they really shut them down. And it was that pick 6 that really was the icing on the cake and really turned the tables of why the Ravens lost that game. And then when he went out, it was too late at that point. Lamar just went back to what he is. He's just not a guy who could perform in the postseason. It's as simple as that.
It's a real thing. That playoff monkey, as they call it, that to have on your back, that's a real thing. And when they won in wild card weekend, people said, people in Baltimore and Lamar Jackson truthers, they breathed a sigh of relief. Well, he finally won a playoff game, so that means we're good. Lamar Jackson is going to be okay. Well, just like I'd like to think we're kind of all around the same age here, where Nintendo and Legend of Zelda was big when we were kids, and we would get so far we could only get to so many castles, and then we lost to Bowser and died every time, right? So same thing with Lamar Jackson in terms of playing. Every year he'll get to a certain point, and then, boom, he's done here. So I'm with you guys. I think it's a consensus here. Lamar Jackson is just not it.
Well, and they're going to be married to him. You can't move away from him. You have to retain Lamar Jackson. He's your identity. And once you do that, it just makes it so much harder to maintain that defense, to stock your skill positions, to put an offensive line in front of him as he gets older to keep him healthy. And I just think I think they're in jeopardy of, we talked about the Browns and how sustainable what they're doing is. I think we're going to see a shift in the next year or two where the Ravens are going to kind of fall back a little bit.
So you think Lamar Jackson will be out of Baltimore? The Ravens are going to move on from him?
Oh, not at all. I think they have to pay him. Because imagine the PR disaster that would be if you, first of all, I don't think anybody in the NFL has the guts to move on from a young former MVP 4 years into the league. So it'd be a PR disaster. I think they're just kind of stuck. They're painted into a corner. They have to keep him. They have to pay him the money. And once they do that, it's going to be real difficult for them to manage the rest of that roster.
Yeah, I think they definitely have to keep him, again, like you said, because he won an MVP and this and that. But I just think with him under center, your team is limited. Sure, they'll be in the playoffs every year, but that's not what fans want and what the organization wants. Knocking on the door, that's great and all. It's great to host a playoff game here and there. but at one point you got to deliver. And I just think that this is going to be a reoccurring thing with the Baltimore Ravens. If he can't figure out in the playoffs, if he doesn't become a better passer, which people tried to think last year when he won MVP, he threw for, I believe, 3,600 yards or 3,500 yards or something. He looked like he was going to be a good passer, but once the playoffs come, we saw the same Lamar Jackson. So I think that's probably one of the biggest flaws with him, and I think really this is his ceiling. I don't think he's going to get any better. I'm always a believer. 3 years in the league is when we can really judge players. People thought it was critical to judge him after 2 years, but now it's 3 years. I believe once 3 years hits, then you could really judge a player.
And we're seeing that with Josh Allen now, because a year ago, even 2 years ago for sure, we were having the exact same conversation. I wasn't a Josh Allen believer. I thought he was a great athletic quarterback that had all the tools, but was never going to be able to put it together as a passer. We saw him take that step forward this year, and now they're a championship contender. We haven't seen that step from Lamar Jackson. I don't think we're going to.
Yeah, I want to talk about the Buffalo Bills now. Again, they're made it to the AFC Championship game for the first time since 1994 when they had those stretches of 4 consecutive Super Bowl runs. What do you guys think of the Bills now? Do they really stand a chance against the defending champion Kansas City Chiefs? And we're assuming we're going to see Pat Mahomes. What do you guys think of that? They've been super hot all year long, playing great football, entering the AFC Championship game. I believe they won 10 of their last 11 games outside of that DeAndre Hopkins Megatron 2.0 triple coverage miracle Hail Mary. What do you guys think about that?
I think they're 100% legit, and it's because I've stopped counting Josh Allen out. Like I was not a believer, as I said, and every time I think he's gone as far as he can go, he proves me wrong. And it's because he's making those really, really legitimate throws now on a consistent basis. He still does something wacky every game and something stupid, and that ultimately could be something that costs him if he does it on Sunday. But I think that team is also built well around him. They don't have a dynamic running game, and with Zach Moss out now, they're a little bit limited. But they didn't have to last week. They didn't really throw it that much because Josh Allen himself poses the threat of running the football. But also, they've got the weapons. They've got an offensive line good enough to keep him upright, and that defense is really, really solid. It's coached well, and they have a shutdown corner, and that's something that comes in handy during the playoffs. Obviously, they're going up against, assuming Pat Mahomes is on the field Sunday, they're going up against the best, but I give them a legitimate chance to win, and it's because I've become a believer in Josh Allen.
What I find shocking here, and it's in a good way, shock and awe in a good way for a change. We haven't seen, again, maybe I'm off here. You guys let me know. I firmly believe we have yet to see Josh Allen's best season as a professional quarterback, and that's scary given what he's done this year. We saw him come in and make Stephon Diggs top 5 wide receiver, top 10 for sure in terms of, I'm predisposed to always, fantasy football, DFS, but real life football. Stephon Diggs is outstanding, and it's because of the relationship that he has with Josh Allen. And again, you said, in the third season is when we can really start to judge players. I take that a step further, and I think, well, have we seen said player's best season as a professional player? And that helps me in terms of, researching and writing about someone. And Josh Allen, he has that team on the verge of the Super Bowl, right? And I still think that the Buffalo Bills, their window to win is just opening. We're looking at a handful of years starting now until 4 or 5 years where the Bills are going to be in this conversation every season until how many Super Bowls do they win? I don't know. And I'm not a Buffalo Bills slappy. I could, my allegiance doesn't lie with the Bills. It's just exciting when you see a young team kind of learning as they go, trial by fire, putting it all together, whatever other cliches you want to say here. So Josh Allen is a stone cold stud. He's only going to get better. And it's exciting for Buffalo, the state of New York and Buffalo, to realize we're just scratching the surface in terms of how good our team can be, how much our team can win here. So, Josh Allen's got a cannon arm. He does, as you said, he makes a boneheaded play every once in a while, but he's learning as he goes, and he's learning on the fly, and they're winning at the same time. So the Bills are fantastic. And again, I think they can win in Kansas City. If anybody is going to give Kansas City a fight in the AFC, it's going to be Buffalo here. So we're in for one heck of a game here on Sunday, guys.
The best hire for head coach isn't always the sexy hire. I think all of us were scratching our heads a little bit when they hired Sean McDermott. He was kind of an unknown. He was never the hot name. And And you can just tell when that team plays week in, week out. They play hard, and they're a well-coached team on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, I get that with the Bills, that people are trying to give them a chance, that they have a great run and all this and that. Sure, I think their championship window is just starting now. I do see championship aspirations, and then in years down the road, it's not this year though. It stops now. As long as Mahomes is on the field, I don't care what they say that he's banged up. If he's on the field, the Chiefs are winning this game. The Bills have a great run. Allen has been phenomenal this year. In the beginning of the year, I was a big-time Josh Allen, as they would say, quote-unquote, hater. Because I thought the first 3 to 4 games, I thought it was a little bit of a fluke. He got a hot start. One of those wins was against the Jets, and as bad as they were this year, conversation for another time. I just thought that, you know what, he's going to come down to earth because his rookie year, he wasn't that good. Out of Wyoming, I just thought he was a guy with a big arm and athletic kid who could throw the ball far, but I thought he had a pretty low ceiling. I understood he had a high ceiling, but I thought there's a better chance he was going to hit that floor rather than that ceiling. And then a few weeks, it looked like he was really coming back down to earth. I was like, oh, I told you, see, he's coming back down to earth. And then the last 11 games, man, he has been sensational. But I got to give credit to Stephon Diggs. What Stephon Diggs has done for Allen, wow. I mean, that was probably the best move of the offseason. After looking back at the 2020 season, we could say the Bills acquiring Stephon Diggs was the best move of the season. Led the league in receptions, led the league in yards, just a security blanket and someone for comfort for Josh Allen. But sure, their defense looks good at times and this and that, but this is a different ball game. The Kansas City Chiefs, the defending champions at Arrowhead Stadium, and we know how much of an impact playing in front of that Bills crowd with Bills Mafia behind you is for that team. Now going into Arrowhead, that's a different ball game. I just think Mahomes in that offense is too much for them. I just believe Mahomes is a guy who could literally just flip a switch, and whenever he wants to turn it up, he turns it up. That offense just has way too much firepower. That defense, though, that's where things could get a little shaky because their run defense is awful. Their secondary is not too much better. And towards the end of the season, it looked like that Chiefs defense was turning into that 2018 defense that we seen was the 31st ranked defense in the league. And that was ultimately why they lost the AFC Championship game against the Chiefs, not the Chiefs, obviously, against the Patriots that year. I believe that's what the Chiefs' liability is. But I always tell people, there's one way you could beat the Kansas City Chiefs, and that's beat them in a shootout. But the problem with that is the Chiefs are really good at doing that too when you have the best quarterback in the game. Just the duo of Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce is too much to game plan. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I don't know if he's playing. I don't know the status on him. He obviously missed last week. But if he could play this week, then things could change. And I believe that's going to be their ace in the hole. Like if they have him going, Mahomes is healthy, then I think the Chiefs have this in the bag. Sure, Josh Allen could be a championship caliber quarterback. I just don't think it's this year.
There's certain things that happen on the defensive side of the ball, and I'm with you 100%. Kansas City defense isn't great, but they're not horrible. But teams go on playoff runs and magical things happen, and one or two guys on the defensive side of the ball, kind of develop into heroes, folklore, things along those lines. And Daniel Sorensen, the safety, is doing that. He was an addition on IDP teams, middle of the season because he was making plays, interceptions, tackles along those lines. And look what happened in the Cleveland game. He came in and he punched Higgins. Should have been a targeting or a helmet to helmet, as I believe you said, Dan, earlier in the broadcast here. Yeah. But he's flying around the field, and he's not a superstar. He's not a stud at the free safety position, but he's doing just enough to put that defense over the hump. So if you can have a defense, that does a little bit more than they're supposed to pair that with what Mahomes is doing on offense, it's a scary team. And I think it goes without saying that their championship window, they're right in the midst of it, having won last year. And I don't see them being out of this position season after season for quite some time. You're right. Mahomes flips the switch and bam, they're on. I think they run, I heard Tony Romo say it 17,000 times, that RPO, run pass option. And it's the same drag route from Tyreek Hill every time. He comes in and he cuts across the field. And if you hit him on stride right in the middle of it, he can take it 75 yards, 85 yards, whatever they need. And they got Travis Kelce doing the same thing out this way. So it's just really tough to, try and stifle what they're doing here. And Kansas City is fantastic. I said it once already. Sorry to repeat myself, boys, but this is going to be a damn good game.
The Bills certainly have a chance to win. It just feels like maybe they're 1 year away from being able to win a game like this. I think one thing that kind of separates, if they had a more dynamic presence in the backfield to go along with Josh Allen, I think they could take advantage of that porous run defense of the Kansas City Chiefs. I don't know that Devin Singleton is that guy, or Singletary is that guy, and they're missing Zach Moss now too. So, if they had that back, I think it might be a whole different story.
And what's wild to me is, given the 2021 free agents here, Chris Carson in Seattle, who's I believe is only 26 or 27. An awesome fit. What about Aaron Jones in Green Bay? I'd be hard pressed to think Green Bay lets Aaron Jones walk, but you got A.J. Dillon, who, a nasty fumble last week. But, all these teams, there's a lot of moving parts here. And to think
Leonard Fournette would fit there really well too.
Yeah, it's fun for three guys like us to talk in the middle of the afternoon on a Tuesday about what free agents are going to go where. But can you imagine if Carson or Jones or even Leonard Fournette went to Buffalo? You took the words right out of my mouth, Dan. If they can get a stud RB1, who's a PPR kind of guy, catches passes too, that offense is going to be ridiculous. And they're a year away. And if they add a guy like Aaron Jones or Leo Fournette, as you said, or they're going to be fantastic for a long time.
Let's switch gears a little bit. Let's go to the NFC. How about the New Orleans Saints? That they lost again. It's 4 years in a row, 4 disappointing playoff runs. I believe the Saints were every single year they look like the top team in the NFC, and they just let us down once again earlier than expected. They got the running game with Alvin Kamara. They've had a top defense the past 4 years, and every single postseason they're disappointing us. What do you guys think on this? If Drew Brees decides to play another NFL season, if he decides he doesn't want to retire, should the Saints bring him back and give him one last hurrah, or it's just time to move on?
Well, that's a tough one because I've been such a Drew Brees fan for so long. I just always rooted for him. Love watching him play. He looked like a guy who was done this weekend, and everything he's meant to that city of New Orleans. If he came into the owner's office and said, "Hey man, I'm inspired. I want to come back and play another year. I got hurt this year. I missed some games. I think we have the pieces in place to make another championship run. I want to do it." Man, I wouldn't want to be the owner of the Saints and be in that position to tell a guy like Drew Brees, who's such a legend in that city and with that franchise, that no, I think it's time for us to move on. I think, they're secretly hoping that he is done. It sounds like that decision's been made. Jay Glazer was reporting that over the weekend. He has a contract waiting for him, multi-million-dollar deal with NBC to be an analyst so he can transition right into that thing. We even, most of us, I'm sure we saw the home video that was taken, or the cell phone video of the meeting that he and Brady had after the game, after they were back in street clothes, and Brees was out there with his wife and his kid on the field, and Brady threw a little touchdown pass to one of Brees' sons. That felt like a moment where Brady knows what's happening. He knew that was the last time he was going to see Brees on the field of battle. Brees knew that was the last time he was going to get to walk on that field after a game. It feels like it is done, and I think it needs to be, because he's a guy that he's just so limited in what they do. We saw that this weekend in how Peyton called the game, and I think if you pumped him full of truth serum, Sean Payton would probably tell you he wants a chance to coach another quarterback now too. It's just time.
Yeah, 100%. See, when you ask the question, Dan goes first, and I'm left with the scraps. You tied that one up in a nice little bow. So my initial reaction was Tom Brady's probably going to be around long enough to throw the ball to Drew Brees' son in an NFL game in the future here. That's how wild this whole year and how good Tom Brady has played. But in terms of Drew Brees, I firmly believe he's done. I'm in Michigan. I'm a Big Ten guy. Got to watch him play at Purdue. Played in a Rose Bowl, right? And it's over for him. It's a nice run. I don't think he's going out under horrible situation. He did everything he could possibly do as an NFL quarterback. He won a Super Bowl. He was in Pro Bowls. He helped that city when they needed it the most after the hurricane. I mean, the stories that you could tell just go on and on and on. And I think it's best for him, and I believe he firmly believes this too. Him and I haven't talked about this, but I can just tell that he's ready to walk away. He's got a beautiful wife, a bunch of healthy kids. It's time for him to switch gears and do something else that will fulfill him and give him enjoyment. Can you imagine Tony Romo and Drew Brees in a game? I know they probably you'd need the guy calling the game since they're both probably color guys here, but Drew Brees in the booth talking to us the way Romo does. They see the play before it happens. They can see the play five minutes in advance. That's how good and smart these guys are. Drew Brees, it was a great career. It's time to walk away, which I believe he will. And Dan, you're absolutely right. Sean Payton probably wants to coach another quarterback here. But who's that quarterback going to be? That's the discussion that we need to have here in the near future. Taysom Hill, Jameis Winston, what the heck is going to happen there? But Drew Brees, congratulations. And I believe he's done, and happy for him.
Yeah.
No. He looked done on Sunday. 134 yards, 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions, 2 interceptions in the fourth quarter. That was the end of the Saints championship window officially. I've always said in sports, there's this just thing when you have a heartbreaking defeat, it's just really hard to ever recover, and your franchise will never recover. And that happened, the Stephon Diggs miracle back a few years ago. Yeah. That really just set the tone for that team. Once that happened, the Saints were really, I just don't believe they were ever able to recover. We look at the Cleveland Indians. They were up 3-1 in the World Series. They blew that lead. The next year against the Yankees in the ALDS, they blew a 2-0 lead. And look at what they've been. They've been nothing ever since. The Atlanta Falcons, we know that story. Matt Ryan wins MVP, 15-1 in the Super Bowl, up 28-3. Blow that lead. What have the Falcons done? What has Matt Ryan done since then? They've never recovered from that. That's what I believe was the thing with the Saints. That year when they lost the Vikings 24-23 on basically the last play of the game, that's what I thought was they were never going to recover from, because history repeats itself. And once you have that heartbreaking defeat, you're never able to recover. We see the following year, the famous pass interference call. Right then and there, another heartbreaking defeat. And then and again, in the NFC Championship game, no less, a heartbreaking way to not make the Super Bowl. And that would have been a year that they probably could have beat the Patriots in the Super Bowl. And then last year, Kirk Cousins literally outplayed Drew Brees, and Taysom Hill even outplayed Drew Brees in that game, for crying out loud. Drew Brees was the third best quarterback. Losing to Kirk Cousins, who's known for failing on primetime, not being clutch in the fourth quarter, losing in overtime at home, really bad luck. And then this year, him dealing with the rib injury towards the end of the year, and then that was just an awful way to go down. I mean, I would like to see Brees come back for another year with another team. I just don't think it's the Saints. The Saints got to move on from Brees, because right then and there, their championship window has officially closed with them. And there's no reason to bring back a 42-year-old if you know you have no aspirations for winning. It's a totally different station with the Bucs bringing in Tom Brady. Brady, a history of just winning, and more winning. And then this year, throws for 5,000 yards, 43 touchdowns, and look at them, back in the NFC Championship game. But who will be the Saints quarterback of the future? There's 2 guys I think they got to target, because it's definitely not Jameis Winston. We've seen what kind of turnover machine he is. And I don't think Taysom Hill's a legit quarterback in this league. He's a good wildcat player, makes a little flashy play, a fan favorite. He's a tough-nosed guy. I get all that. I think the Saints need to look to trade for Deshaun Watson, or if the Jets are looking to move on from Sam Darnold, target him. Sean Payton, a great offensive mind. That Saints team loaded on the offensive side of the ball. We know what Alvin Kamara brings to the table. Michael Thomas, when he's right, is the best receiver in the league. This year, he just wasn't right. I think that was pretty clearly obvious. But if Sean Payton could get a guy like Sam Darnold, who I believe has a ton of talent, can be a great quarterback in this league, he was just with the worst franchise in the league, with an awful ownership and an awful coach who didn't believe in him, with no weapons around him. So of course he's going to fail. That's totally expected. But I think if Darnold is with the right coaching staff, with pieces around him, he will have a great NFL career. It's just not with the Jets. And then the more expensive piece, Deshaun Watson, he wants out of Houston. That would be an awesome move for the Saints. If the Saints could pull off Deshaun Watson, they'll be right back looking to win championships. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a tough situation. I think, on one hand, I think Sean Payton thinks very highly of himself and his ability to get the most out of players. And I think there's a chance that he believes they can win with Jameis Winston. He can cut down on the turnovers and take advantage of his skills, because he certainly has tremendous talent throwing the football down the field. The other scenarios you paint, I could see a situation with Darnold, whether or not they have the draft capital to compete with other teams that may be interested in trading for a quarterback like that. I like that idea better than Deshaun Watson. I think at the end of the day, when Deshaun Watson moves on from Houston, it's going to be to a team that has much more draft capital and cap space available to be able to make that move and make it attractive enough to Houston. But there are some other intriguing possibilities that may happen over the next 60 days. We may see Jimmy Garoppolo be available. That might be a guy that Sean Payton has some interest in. We certainly are going to see Matt Stafford be available. I could really see him fit in there. Still has the ability to push the ball down the field and can really fit in nicely with that Payton offense. And then every year there's a couple of guys that we're not sure that we don't know about that end up becoming available. But I do think that they're not just going to sit back and hand the job to Jameis Winston, that they're going to turn over every stone they can and try and find a guy that can fit with Sean Payton there.
All right, so go.
I was just going to touch on Stafford. That was a very nice name drop by Dan there. I haven't heard many people talk about Matt Stafford going elsewhere. Those of us that are in Michigan or in Detroit, you're either you want the Lions to get rid of Stafford or you want to win now with Stafford. Either way, I think that the Lions, it would be best for them to move on from Stafford. And in terms of Watson to New Orleans the shift that would create in the NFC
unfair.
would be unbelievably insane. There's not many other teams in the NFC that would be able to match up with that combo of MT, Watson, and Alvin there. It would just be shockingly beautiful, let's say. That's the word I'll use. And again, to you, Brendan, I haven't you and I are like in the select few of people who love Sam Darnold, who believe in Sam Darnold. I catch so much crap on a daily basis, so much that I don't even mention it anymore because, social media is such a flippant, toxic place. But Sam Darnold to New Orleans makes sense too. And to be fair, this is kind of one every time. Wild card weekend's the best time of the year. Championship Sunday is the best time of the year. The off season is the best time of the year. It's 24/7, 365 is the best day of the year to talk football and what we're doing. I don't know a whole heck of a lot, who's going where, what's going to happen, and what they're doing, but it's sure as heck a lot of fun talking about it. So Darnold to New Orleans has my vote.
I have one more topic real quick we could touch on before I got to switch into some NBA. I want to know your thoughts on the Packers are now officially the favorites to win the Super Bowl over the defending champion Kansas City Chiefs. Does that have to do with the Packers just rolling right now, or does that have to do with the injury of Mahomes? Real quick.
I'll let you go first so that I have to pick up the pieces after you.
The one where we go quick. I get 2 seconds and I get yeah, the Packers are playing outstanding. Aaron Rodgers has found another gear. He's on another planet. And that combination of Jones, Adams, and Rodgers are unbelievably fantastic. And I 100% believe they're the favorites now because we don't know what's going on with Mahomes' neck and his nerve. It's not like it's his hand, like his offhand throwing. This is a nerve in your neck. It controls a lot of things. So, yes, Green Bay is the favorite because of what's going on with Mahomes.
And understanding that you can never count out Tom Brady, especially as well as they're playing. And if there's one guy in the league that's comfortable playing in a big game in cold weather, outside of Aaron Rodgers, it's Tom Brady. We know that. I just think the reason Green Bay, I thought when David Bakhtiari went out for the season, that was going to be a big blow to them. They just pick up right where they left off. And I think it's because Matt LaFleur is hands down right now the best play caller in the NFL outside, not named Andy Reid. And I think what makes them the favorite for me is he has the pieces in place and he's going to find a way so impressive with his feel for a game and making adjustments in game. I just think he's going to find a way. He and Rodgers are on the same page and that's a really good combination. And I think it's one that's going to end up hoisting the Lombardi when it's all said and done.
I'm a huge fan of Aaron Rodgers and these Green Bay Packers, but I just feel like it's utterly ridiculous to call them the favorites. If Mahomes is on the field Sunday, there's no reason why the Packers should be the favorites to win the Super Bowl. Number one, I'm not going to pick the Packers to win this game on Sunday. I am picking Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. My preseason take on the Buccaneers was they will make the Super Bowl. That was my pick. The Buccaneers will make the Super Bowl. I said September, October is going to be a slow month for Brady and these Bucs. I just feel like with the no preseason, no OTAs, no training camp, and a 43-year-old entering a new system, it's going to take some time. Once November, December hit is when they're really going to roll, and once January comes, Brady's not a guy you bet against. Well, that wasn't ideally true, but it looks like my take is aging kind of well. Obviously, November was an awful month for Brady. He looked like one of the worst quarterbacks in the league. And September, October, and especially October, Brady looked fantastic. But once December hit, Brady looks like Brady. January coming now, Brady looks like Brady. A really tough team to bet against right now. They have a top defense in the league, and they have basically three all-pro wide receivers. This is a really tough team to bet against, and we know what we're going to get with Brady. We saw it this Sunday, especially in that fourth quarter. He's a guy who's clutch, big on third down, makes the right decisions with the ball. You could trust him with the ball in his hands, and you know he can manage a game with talent around him. The Packers, as great as they are, Rodgers going to win MVP, 48 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. We know the whole story. The thing is with the Packers, I feel like every year they're in position to win a championship or make the championship, and just something happens where there's an upset and they lose. And they're disappointing us year after year. I want to see Rodgers in the Super Bowl. Ideal situation is we see probably the two most talented quarterbacks in the history of this game matchup between Mahomes and Rodgers. Just something tells me 2 number 1 seeds aren't going to make it, and I'm not betting against Mahomes. And especially with Brady coming into town, he's a bad dude. Still at 43 years old, he's a bad dude. I'm taking the Bucs. Final thoughts.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I've already made peace with the fact that the Lions and the entire NFC North isn't going to do much as long as Aaron Rodgers is the Green Bay Packers quarterback. Much like you think of Tom Brady, can't count him out. I feel the exact same about Aaron Rodgers in the Green Bay Packers. Who the heck would have thought the Packers would be where they are now because of Aaron Rodgers? I mean, going into the season, how many touchdowns did he throw for the season? 43, 44, not including the playoffs here. When Aaron Rodgers is the starting quarterback anywhere, you have to look at that team in a different light. The day Aaron Rodgers leaves, hopefully on a good note, just retiring, is the day that the cities of Detroit, Chicago, and Minnesota will rejoice. We finally, there might be a changing of the guard in the North once Aaron Rodgers leaves. And in terms of Tom Brady, he's terrorized the AFC East for how many years? I believe Sunday will be his 14th overall championship conference game. AFC, obviously, and one in the NFC here. But I it's hard for me to count out Tom Brady, too. The guy, that's what he does. He just wins. And I'm kind of favorable to him, having him. He played it here at Michigan, and that's the college team I follow here. So as long as Tom Brady's playing, he's my guy. That's it.
He has so many weapons. I do think that Tampa Bay has a chance to win if the game's a shootout, because that Green Bay defense has some vulnerability. I just think at the end of the day that Tampa Bay's defense plays well at times. They're very young, though. They make mistakes. I don't think they have anyone that can cover Devontae Adams, and I think Matt LaFleur is going to figure out a way to attack him.
Devontae Adams has proven to be the best receiver in the league. If you're going to ask me, the best quarterback-wide receiver duo is certainly Rodgers to Adams. But that's all the time we have today in terms of NFL. I got to move on to NBA, but I want to thank you guys for joining me. If you want to shout out your platforms real quick, go ahead.
Yeah, you can find me on the Emerald City Sportscast, part of the new 365 Sportscast Network. My show is live every Wednesday, so I'll be on tomorrow at 1 o'clock Eastern Time, 10 a.m. Pacific. You can find it. There's an Android app for the 365 Sportscast. You can go to 365sportscast.com, and the iPhone app should be ready later this week. Watch for that.
That's fair. I'll have to check that out after we're done here. You could find me at Detroit Beastie. I've transitioned into a lot of DFS. Hockey DFS, the NHL is back. My first love. Ice hockey, being here in Michigan in the wing. So look for, it's called Hot Pucking Stacks every day. It's just some stacks for FanDuel, for DraftKings, right here at DFS Cheat Sheet, or right on my Twitter at Detroit Beastie. Thanks so much for having me.
What's going on, guys? Going to transition to some NBA. Got Shannon Walsh from Belly Up Sports with me. Shannon, how's it going?
I'm good. How are you?
Great. We have a lot of stuff going on in the NBA, and we know what the hot topic is. It's the Brooklyn Nets acquiring James Harden, Kyrie Irving missing in action. But with Harden playing 2 games with the Brooklyn Nets, He looks real good. The Nets look real good. And this is without Kyrie Irving. What do you think of James Harden to the Nets right now? A lot of people said the trio's not going to work. People just think Harden's just a cancer because he dominates the ball too much, takes too many bad shots. But what we've seen in only 2 games, has it proved that this is going to work, Harden being in a Brooklyn Nets uniform?
You have to perhaps consider that Kyrie is not back yet. And I think that in terms of the trio, Kyrie is the one that dominates the ball arguably more than Harden. But I do think that it is really exciting to see him in a Nets uniform, which I never thought I would say. I think that Harden has shown that he really wasn't happy in Houston a lot more than we were, led on to believe. When you see him, how happy he is on the court, it's, really reassuring and kind of makes you step back and think, well, maybe they weren't just getting together to make that super team, blah, blah, blah. Obviously, there is something behind wanting to get that championship, but he just genuinely looks more happy on the court. And I think that does equate a lot to the production that he's had in the last 2 games.
I think it's utterly ridiculous how people try to think that James Harden with the Nets would hurt them or it wouldn't work. Here's the thing. A lot of people are trying to say that Kyrie may not work with this trio, whatever. We'll touch on Kyrie in the trade in one bit. But I just want to talk about Harden being with this team. Of course this is going to work. My preseason take with the Nets, and people who've been following me, who know me, know I am super high in the Nets. I said within 15 games, which we're at 15 games now, they will start 8-7. I was 1 game off. I was one Chris Middleton shot away from being dead on right with that. And I said once they get to the playoffs, they will get through the Eastern Conference in 15 games or less and make the NBA Finals. That's how high I am on them. I don't believe there's a team in the East who really could compete with them, if you're really going to ask me. Harden is going to make this team better. I think it's going to be a little bit of a chemistry experiment throughout this year. That's what this is really going to come down to. It's going to say, how does this work? But right now, Harden and Durant as a duo looks better than Kyrie and KD as of now. I don't know what the drama is with Kyrie, and neither really does anyone else. He's coming back tomorrow against the Cavs. To say that they should trade Kyrie right now, I think is a little ridiculous and a little quick. You have till March 25th until the trade deadline. If you want to say you're open to trading him or not counting it out, sure, I'm with that. I wouldn't say Kyrie is untouchable right now, but Durant signed with Brooklyn because Kyrie was going there also. Kyrie actually signed first. So with that being said, you can't just say, oh, well, Durant plays a few games, you trade for James Harden, and then you get rid of Kyrie. In terms of basketball, talent is just going to overpower other talent in this league. It's not like baseball where the team who's hot, or it's a matchup, a pitching matchup, you get an edge. Or in football, it's another thing. It's a big matchup thing. The best team doesn't always win. Basketball, when there's just more superior talent, that's going to overlap some teams. I think this is going to be a chemistry experiment. I think when Kyrie returns, they will struggle and it will take a little bit of time. But once they get rolling, man, this is going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like you said, it'll take some growing pains. And, that happens all the time. I'm a little bit surprised that Harden was able to mesh so quickly on the court. And I think, to note on your playoff comment, although I'm a Celtics fan, so I do slightly disagree with your comment that no team in the East can overtake them. I think that one thing to note is that they did trade a majority of their rotation to get Harden. So in terms of depth in the playoffs, I would be a little bit concerned about that and durability getting later in the season. But then again, I haven't seen KD in a playoff in years now. So that could be different. Kyrie wasn't in the playoffs with the Celtics, didn't play most of it. So assuming that he still is with the Nets by that point, it might not be an issue. It's just something to consider now without Karis LeVert and all of those guys.
Since you're a Celtics fan, now I got to come at you. You just open up the floodgates. First of all, without Kemba Walker, the Celtics really aren't doing anything. It's really important the Celtics get him back in the lineup better sooner than later. But again, in the East, there's not that many teams that are really going to be competitive. The Celtics are one of those teams that are competitive. They need Kemba Walker healthy, or else they really have no shot. But even if they have Kemba Walker and they match up against this Brooklyn Nets team, they could push them probably 5 games if they're lucky. That's their ceiling against this Nets team. There is too much talent. There's just nobody in this league who could check KD. I really feel bad for anyone who has to guard that guy. A 7-foot sniper could pull up from 30, the mid-range, just gets to his spots, and he scores just so effortlessly, and it's efficient. It's jump shots. It's not like some guys, like LeBron James is a guy I believe could score just as much as KD does, because he literally scores the basketball more than KD a little bit, but he does. he has to work more for his points than KD does. KD is more versatile and it's just more effortless. Harden is another guy who's unguardable. He's probably the best ISO scorer in the league. Last year averaged 34 a game. The year before averaged 36 a game. Take guys off the dribble. Guys know that step back's coming and it's unguardable. Harden is a better playmaker than people try to make him seem. And another reason why I call this a chemistry experiment, Harden's going to run point. He even said after the game, he said, I've really got to work on my point guard skills. I got to play make, but I also got to work on the turnovers. He turned the ball over a ton last night, but that's just a thing that when you're working out a new system and you have a new role, you're going to make mistakes. And at the end of the day, you're going to learn from your mistakes. I'm not worried about this team one bit, but when Kyrie comes, Kyrie, I think, out of the three are probably going to have to take a backseat. Again, I don't know if he's going to be able to take a backseat. We know how much drama he has, the big ego. He wanted to leave the Cavs and leave LeBron James because he wanted to be that number one option. But again, with Brooklyn, he knew what he was signing up for because Durant and Irving had plans to team up with the Knicks or with the Nets, and it obviously ended up being the Nets. So he knew he was going to be a number two option because KD's obviously a better player than Kyrie. So I don't know what Kyrie's take is on Harden coming in the lineup, but if he causes drama and he's still not right in March, then it's like, all right, he's got to go. But I think if they're buying into a championship, because a team like Brooklyn, and you're in the Brooklyn, New York, the nation's media capital, that's a city where you need to deliver a title. If they just get one title with this James Harden trade, then they win the trade. You can't say right now if they won or didn't win the trade, but I just think see how Kyrie works in the system. If it works, they're going to be really deadly and a team that could defeat the defending champion, reigning champion Los Angeles Lakers. But you got to see how it works out, and you can't come to a conclusion right now. It's a lot of people are trying to say.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can't come to a conclusion. Obviously, he's only played 2 games, but I think you made a good point when you said that Kyrie's going to probably have to play third string. That was his biggest issue in Boston, that he wasn't able to play that center role. The Celtics just don't build a roster around one person. He didn't want to do that with LeBron either. There's a lot of people that just say he didn't like LeBron, which is a fair statement as well. But you're going to the Nets. You got to think about Harden knew what he wanted when he said he wanted to go to the Nets, but he knew that Kyrie had those behavioral issues. Is there something else that he's either aware of, or does he just really not care and just assumes, like you said, he's going to run point and Kyrie's taking that back seat? I mean, it's a chemistry gamble, and it's a little worrisome as someone watching from the outside that they just assume, I'm going to be that first guy. I'm going to be that first guy. And if all three of them assume that, it's not going to work out on the court. But I mean, as three of the best basketball players in the league, you have to assume that they'll be able to figure out the chemistry. But I mean, Kyrie hasn't done it in the past.
Well, with the thing with that I want to touch on, I don't think it's necessarily a chemistry gamble because you have time before the trade deadline. If something doesn't work, you could trade him and get your bench way deeper. And Kyrie's just a talent where teams are going to want him as an asset. And in terms of Harden wanting to go to the Brooklyn Nets, I totally understand why he wanted to do it. Durant is boys with Irving. He's also boys with Harden. Durant reportedly wanted Harden to come to the Nets, which I totally support. So with that being said, Harden is in the conversation for greatest player of all time to never win a title. The scoring titles, won in league MVP. I mean, he averaged 36 points a game in a season. That's the most since Michael Jordan in his 3rd year. Anytime you're in the same sense of scoring and Jordan, you did something right. Last year averaged 34 a game, but it's kind of shown that I don't know if Harden's a number one option on a championship team, especially with guys like Kevin Durant in the league, guys like LeBron James in the league, Kawhi Leonard's of the world. I don't think Harden is necessarily a number one option, but for him to be an NBA champion, then his resume is officially fulfilled. And he's a key part to winning a championship, even though he probably wouldn't be the finals MVP. That would officially just cement his legacy. Again, he's a guy. People hear what the media has to say. He's a guy that is a scoring machine in the regular season. And then in the postseason, again, regular season is always literally a different season. The regular season and postseason is literally 2 different seasons. The game slows down, more half-court basketball. You are keying in on guys for 2 weeks. You're game planning to stop them. And that's why Harden's game just shown hasn't necessarily translated to the playoffs. So I think playing with Durant alongside him, 2 guys who could score the basketball at any given moment, I think the Nets are stacked right now. You try this out with Kyrie, and if it doesn't work, then you trade him. But I do think it's a little bit of I can't see them actually trading Kyrie Irving because, again, like I said earlier, Durant and Irving pre-planned where they were going. They planned that they were teaming together. We knew it was going to be one of the New York teams, and it happened to be the Brooklyn Nets, which from my sources and what I've heard, Irving wanted to go to the Nets, and Katie wanted to go to the Knicks. So Kevin Durant really followed him. I think Durant recruiting Harden means he wanted to have this trio. So with that being said, I mean, I do think that they're going to really try to rock this out. But worst case scenario comes, then you could trade.
Yeah, I mean, I think, part of me wants them to trade him because I don't think that he's respected the Nets enough at the start of this season for them to really ride it out. But again, he's natural talent, so it's kind of a toss-up. But at Belly Up, in our Belly Up Sports department, we've spoken a lot about what they should do with Kyrie. And obviously there are a lot of Kyrie Irving supporters and a lot of Net supporters. But there are a lot of people that are like, it's still a business and a job, and he is not respecting his job or his place of employment right now. So even though he's a natural talent, like I like to say, I'm very good at my job, but if I didn't show up and didn't talk to my boss, it probably wasn't going to go well either. So I mean, and my coworkers would probably feel the same way. I'd be interested to know, quite frankly, what Durant feels about him not being there. And now if he has Harden, is it really that much of a loss if they were to just build out their rotation and get rid of that extra drama and that extra difficulty in the locker room?
I definitely don't support what Kyrie did in terms of just not showing up, going missing in action for, again, who knows why he did. But the thing with basketball, especially in the NBA, it's a star-struck league. Players have so much power. They could literally do whatever they want. Kawhi Leonard, with the load managing, he didn't play back-to-backs because he didn't feel like it. I don't think it had to do with the health injury. Maybe 1 year it did with his knee, but I think he literally just took days off because he felt like it. He felt like the star power, he was able to just take days off when he wanted to. And guys, when they demand trades, now we're literally see them, if they demand a trade, they go where they want. Kawhi necessarily didn't. Anthony Davis did. Now James Harden did. Guys are going where they want and they get what they want. Kyrie is such a superior talent where you can't just say, oh, if he doesn't come, oh, we're just going to release you or we're going to trade you. It doesn't necessarily work like that because, again, what a weapon he could be in a playoffs, especially in a championship. We've seen him hit one of the most clutch shots in NBA history. So it's just hard to just count him out right then and there. But again, I keep bringing up a chemistry experiment. You could try this out. They got time. You still got a week and a half left in January. You got all February, and you got most of March to figure this out. If things really aren't working, then Kyrie, he's out. And then you try to build some pieces around him. And then Durant and Harden as a duo, that might be a better duo than Kyrie and Harden. But I think this is another thing I definitely want to bring up now that I remember. With Kyrie, Harden, and Kevin Durant being in the lineup, there's one big thing that I'm thinking about. I think a rotation with these three are going to be huge. I don't think you're going to want to see them all at the same in the lineup together throughout this entire that much. I don't think you're going to see a lot of minutes. I think I want to see Durant and Kyrie almost mirror each other's minutes. Like just basically like whenever they're in the game, they should always be in the game together, come out together. And then when one of the three stars should always be in the game at once. When Durant and Irving aren't in, then that's when Harden's in. And flip-flop that rotation outside of obviously when you start a game, end of the second quarter, beginning of the third quarter, end of fourth quarter. Those are the times where I think you should see all three of the stars in at the same time. But outside of those times, I think you should see a lot of Harden playing without Durant and Irving just because of the ball dominance and moving the ball, stuff like that. So that's where I wanted to get at that.
Yeah, no, I think you're completely right. And I think that's one of the areas where they might see chemistry issues is Kyrie and Harden sharing the court. I don't think that they would particularly share a court well in terms of an entire game. If it were for the first, 4 minutes of each quarter, that's one thing. And I think that does do something in terms of confidence on the court. If they're playing, the Magic or the Hawks, because they have a young roster, they go out against the Hawks and those three are on the court, that's going to scare the crap out of those younger guys that are like, oh, well, who gets to guard Harden? Who gets to guard Durant? Whereas if they, only put in Harden and then they put in Kyrie and KD after the first 5 minutes, it might not have the same impact. So I think there is a strategic way to do it. And I definitely wouldn't put Kyrie and Harden on the court at the same time, personally.
Yeah, I'm always a believer when you just have so much talent, it's going to work. I've never been a believer of when you have talent on your roster that's just not going to work. Like, you should take someone who's, like, worse. Like, I'm never a believer in that. Like, people try to get too technical and too picky with the scheme of a basketball game. But I think overall, when you just have that much talent, eventually, it may take some time, but it will work. But I want to switch gears one last topic before we go. The Los Angeles Lakers, they've been rolling all year long, a top defensive team in the league, but they blew a 19-point lead to the Golden State Warriors last night. And a thing that's a little concerning, AD hasn't looked like AD of last year that we seen a year ago, playing alongside LeBron. LeBron, his numbers are slightly down from last year. He's in year 18, but we know he's got that guy who could literally flip a switch and then become the best player in the league. Are there any concerns with the Lakers after this? Is it something we should look at, or it's no big deal because it's one game?
I mean, they still have the top record in the West, unless somebody bumped them literally last night. But from what I understand, they still have the top record in the West. They still are the Lakers. They're still the defending champions. I completely agree with you that AD has not looked his best. I don't know if he's battling some sort of lingering injury or something like that, but he's definitely not as confident on the floor as he was in the past. And I think something to note, particularly because you just said with the Nets, enough talent means probably success. But I think the Lakers are kind of running into a problem where they're just guys want to go live in LA. They want to play for the Lakers. They want to play for the defending champs, but they're just dumping guys onto this roster and not necessarily looking at where they're going to fit. And I think some of it is, unequal puzzle pieces right now. I don't know that some of the guys that they're adding, it's just, if you see a free agent and you're like, oh, where is this person going to go? There's like an 80% chance the next day it's going to say Lakers on the headline. And that doesn't mean that it's the best fit either for the player or for the team. I don't know. People take pay cuts to go to the better teams. The Patriots have it all the time too. But that doesn't mean that it's a good chemistry fit on the court. And I think that's something that maybe the Lakers are struggling with right now. They had so many people that wanted to go play for them because they were so dominant, because they had AD, because they had LeBron. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it's making them better just because they're adding more people.
I'm a little concerned with the Lakers after last night, even though it's just one game, still top seed in the Western Conference. I get all that. But you know what the thing is? It's that blowing a 19-point lead never sits well, and that's going to happen along a season. Dennis Schroeder has been awesome this year. That is literally the exact piece that this team needed, and they got him. A guy who could handle the ball, create his own shot, a second ball handler behind LeBron, play make, create his own shot, finish at the rim, shoot the three ball. He does everything you need and what the Lakers literally needed. That was probably the only piece that they were missing last year they acquired. Montrezl Harrell, the hustler, both ends of the floor, could shoot the mid-range, plays really tough inside both ends of the floor. But the scary thing is, Anthony Davis does not look like Anthony Davis right now. I'm not going to sit here and believe in the injury bug, because last year I feel like he had about 10 catastrophic injuries that it looked like, and then magically minutes later he was fine, or the next game he was fine. So I'm not buying that. But his looks this year don't look good. Sometimes last year we seen him get the ball in the high post and LeBron clears out, it's an automatic bucket, whether it's a mid-range, step back, fade away, get to the rim, finish at the rim, get to the free throw line, shoots 84% from the line. We're not seeing that this year. I'm not seeing that much pick and roll with LeBron and AD. That's virtually unguardable. When LeBron struggles a little bit or he doesn't shoot well, that's not that concerning. But AD, I don't know if he's a guy who could always just kick it up another gear, which last year you could say he kicked it up another gear because he was awesome in the playoffs. He was in the Western Conference playoffs. If there was a Western Conference MVP, he would have been the Western Conference Finals MVP, if you're going to ask me. And then the finals, yeah, LeBron took control of that. But LeBron, I know, could kick it up a little bit. But again, late in games, the thing I like about the Nets and why I've been so high on them is they have guys who are killers in the clutch and could get that shot, that late game shot. Sure, LeBron has proven he's been clutch, even though people have been very critical of his clutch team, which is kind of a false narrative. But late in his career, he can't always just attack the rim. Maybe as good as he used to. Sure, he still can, but it's different when it was about 10 years ago when, he will literally get to the basket literally whenever he wants. He's still a little bit slower. He doesn't have the same bounce and explosion. He has to rely on that jump shot. Last night he didn't shoot well, and neither did AD. I'm concerned about AD's looks because his numbers are down significantly. But again, the Nets have guys who could just create their own shot and get you a bucket at any given point in the fourth quarter. I don't know if the Lakers have that right now. That's why it's a little concerning and a little alarming. If we look at the playoffs last year, there weren't any teams that they played who could really compete with the Lakers. There was really, if we're going to be realistic with ourselves, there's no team that actually could have competed with themselves. That's why they coasted to the championship. They beat the Blazers, which some people were trying to pick the Blazers. That was a joke. They tried to pick the Blazers. We're going to beat them. Then they said the Rockets, then the Nuggets. Those teams couldn't compete with them, and that's why we saw the Lakers almost like blow teams out a lot in the postseason. And then the Heat, the one close game or two close games that they had, that's when the Heat won. So I'm concerned about them in tight games. If those two, if they're best, they are the best duo in the league. If you're going to ask me with LeBron and AD, I don't know if that's the duo where you could just rely on them to get a bucket. AD, sure, he can in the half court, but when he get doubled, he's a little bit exposed. And LeBron, I don't know how reliable his jump shot is. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. It's just inconsistent. And him attacking the basket, it just doesn't look the same this year, even though I know he can kick it up another gear. So he's not that big of a concern for me, but AD is definitely a big concern with me right now.
Yeah, and I think one other thing to note, since you circled back with the Nets, is that the West is not as competitive as it was last year, and the East is more competitive just after the offseason. So if the Lakers can't remain competitive in the West this year and not last year, I mean, they lost to the Warriors, who are one of the bottom tier teams right now after they lost Klay Thompson again. I mean, Steph Curry looks good right now. He had a 62-point game, but I wouldn't say, I mean, after the top three teams in the West, they all have the same record. There's no one that's like wowing me. They're all just above 500. So, I mean, obviously it's still early in the season, but you know, if the Lakers can't remain competitive with that core of teams, then how are they going to, you know, remain competitive when they go into the playoffs and teams are actually solidifying themselves as, you know, deep run teams and deep run players?
There's a few things to that. The East is not competitive. It's the Nets and everybody else. As long as they're healthy, they're winning. They're getting out of the East really quick. They will blow teams out. I still am not a believer that the East is competitive. The West, I see what you're saying. Is there's just not that many. There's not a lot of stacked teams. It's the Lakers, then it's the Clippers, which aren't going to beat the Lakers, the Nuggets, and then everybody else. Which people are still saying the West is more competitive is because seeds like 4 through like 12 is super competitive, and it's teams all above 500. The thing in the East is you have the worst teams in the league, and then the 7-8 seeds sometimes you see below 500. But in terms of the top of the East, it's the Nets and everybody else. Sure, if you want to make your case for your Celtics to be the second best team in the East, I'll give you that. Maybe third. I don't think the Bucks are better than them, and the Heat, I still think, are kind of a bubble team, but I just think it's literally, I literally just cannot see the Nets losing a 7-game series. But with the Lakers, again, I don't think there's a team in the West that could really beat them either. But that finals matchup, I think this is going to be a finals matchup for our lifetime, if you ask me. But I do have concerns with the Lakers right now.
Yeah, I mean, if the Nets make it out of the East, I'm not convinced that, you know, this fantasy is going to last through the playoffs, but we'll see. And, you know, I mean, the Lakers, I wrote an article about how I was concerned that they had signed LeBron for another 2 years with a raise and got a ton of pushback. But like you said, he doesn't look the same driving to the court. Maybe he can kick it up a notch, but the Lakers do not look the same as they did last year. And they built their roster assuming that they were only going to get better. And AD doesn't look the same. LeBron doesn't look the same. Dennis Schroeder looks fantastic, but you know, there's another 20 people on the roster and they all need to drive them to the championship as well. And it doesn't look like they're going to be able to do that right now. I mean, I don't have a replacement for another team that's going to get to the finals. So it's one of those, like, someone has to step up, but the Lakers aren't stepping up right now either.
Well, LeBron can kick it up another gear. We've seen this movie too many times where you can't just say, I don't know if he has it this year. I almost tried to say that last year. I should say, I don't know if LeBron has another gear after game 2 of the first round of the playoffs, and that tape did not age very well. I got a lot of heat for that one. But still, LeBron's numbers are down, and I kind of predicted that. I said his points per game before the season I said this. I said his points per game are going to be between 23 and 24 points. I don't think he's going to hit 25 points a game. Because, again, the additions of Schroeder and Harrell, I think LeBron and AD are going to try to make them carry a heavier load. They basically are, I feel like they're sleepwalking with this top seed in the NBA, rather. They're really sleepwalking with the top seed in the NBA. LeBron's not playing a lot of minutes, AD isn't, and their numbers aren't very good. Sure, LeBron's still getting his. I think he's still doing what we expect him to do, which each year he plays, I think he's still going to be that dude in the playoffs, but I just think the regular season he's going to take it down a little bit each year. Especially, I said that this is probably LeBron's best team he's ever been on, with AD, who's his best teammate by a wide margin, and then probably the deepest roster, especially with Schroeder and Harrell in that lineup. I think Schroeder's and Harrell's numbers are going to be great this year, but I think once the playoffs come, it's going to tick down a little bit. But AD is really my only concern with the Lakers right now, that he just doesn't look the same. And sure, he may be a guy who could kick it up right now, but it just doesn't look like the guy we saw last year. But any final thoughts before we wrap up?
No, I mean, I hope AD kicks it up a notch because I've got him in fantasy basketball and it's not doing me well right now. But, I'm interested to see what the Lakers can do. COVID-19 has obviously messed with a lot of rosters. And so it's even their records right now are kind of hard to depict who's doing well and who's not. The Sixers have played a couple games where they have had like 8 people. So that's clearly not a great depiction of what they're actually going to be like, things like that. And they're not the only team to have been affected. So even though I know the Lakers haven't really been affected, KD was out for 2 weeks. I know they took a couple losses in there. They probably wouldn't have taken things like that. So it'll be interesting to see how it kind of levels out after, every team has kind of faced both that hill, the injury hill, all of that.
Sure. Yeah, that's going to wrap up today's show again. Thank you, everyone who's tuned in. Shannon, if you want to shout out your podcast quick.
Yeah, so I am with Belly Up Sports, and I run their basketball department, but I also am a host of a hockey podcast called Slapshot Sweethearts. So you can find us on Instagram and Twitter, @SSweetheartsPod on Twitter and Slapshot Sweethearts on Instagram. And then if you're interested in any of the Belly Up basketball content, we're at Hoops Belly Up on Twitter.
Thanks for joining me. Great show today.
Yeah, thank you.
It's the Worldwide Sports Radio Network.